The June 2022 comic book sales guesstimates are in from ICV2.com. And we've got some interesting things going here. This is the best month DC Comics has had in probably 7 or 8 months. They actually had 15 titles in the top 50, which is an enormous turnaround. They were down to like 10 last month. So they got a couple of big debuts, and this is exciting. Good news for DC Comics, although we'll see about the staying power of some of the stuff like Poison Ivy. Obviously, the Pride one-shot was a one-shot. It's not coming around until next year. Marvel Comics, we're going to talk about them a little bit more in depth. Normally kind of concentrate on DC, but there's some stuff going on at Marvel that's pretty... it's not good. Let's put it that way. First up, let's look at the top 50 comic book sales numbers. Not surprisingly, Marvel Comics take the first place with 28 titles in the top 50, a 56% share of the top 50 titles. That's an enormous haul for Marvel Comics. DC Comics once again took second place, but with 15 titles in the top 50, much better than they did last month with 10. But keep in mind, 10 of DC Comics' 15 titles are from the Batman franchise, and 7 of them star or co-star Bruce Wayne. So he is absolutely the big flagship, the moneymaker for DC Comics. Everything is about Batman and Bruce Wayne these days. DC Comics has to be over the moon to see Poison Ivy #1 taking the number 8 spot. G. Willow Wilson on a Poison Ivy series doesn't seem all that inviting to me, but apparently people were very happy. They had some really good covers, and they have a fantastic artist on this. So absolutely, DC should be very happy with this, and they should also be happy with the performance of DC Comics Pride 2022. It absolutely pants Marvel's Voices Pride 2022. It actually dropped in the top 25. Marvel's Voices Pride didn't even make it into the top 100. We're going to get into that a little bit more in detail later. We've also got the latest Marvel Comics series starring Steve Rogers as Captain America, coming in at number 18. Keep in mind, I want to put this out there now. The Falcon Cap #1 issue debuted at number 15, so it was actually debuted better. Wait till you see how far the sales drop on that Falcon Cap title, and it may spell some doom for this Steve Rogers Captain America. I think it's a bad idea to have 2 Captain Americas running around the Marvel Comics universe. There's something else I need to point out that I think is very strange. Dark Crisis #1 came out in June of 2022. I believe it came out on June 7th. And it is not included in any of these sales charts. Did they give the damn thing away? Did no one order 1 copy of Dark Crisis? So there's a good chance that DC Comics actually had 16 comics in the top 50, but somehow Dark Crisis wasn't counted. I don't know how it's not here. Obviously, we have Road to Dark Crisis jumping into the top 10. We'll talk a little bit more about Dark Crisis later as well. Some other numbers about the big trends going on. Marvel Comics had 58 titles in the top 100. That is absolutely dominating the entire comic book industry in the top 100. And that's an improvement over the 46 titles that they put in there in May of 2022. And that is quite the substantial improvement, if we must say. DC Comics once again comes in second with only 27 titles. So 27% in the top 100 are DC Comics. And that was actually worse than last month when they had 29. So the top 50 got better because they placed 15 in there, but their numbers dwindled in the top 100. When things go better for DC Comics, they still go worse. It's just the way it is for DC. And also 16 of DC Comics' 27 titles came from the Batman franchise. DC Comics are way too over-reliant on Batman just to sell comic books these days. We'll obviously get into the DC Comics numbers. We've been concentrating a little bit too much on DC Comics here on the channel. So we're going to hit Marvel first. And there's some really interesting things going on with Marvel sales. When we start looking at the different franchises that they have, Spider-Man, X-Men, Avengers, and stuff like that, there's some really interesting things. There's some stuff they're definitely doing right, and there's some stuff they're definitely doing wrong. But first, let's look at the debuts. Which comics had a #1 issue, and how did those come out? As I mentioned earlier, everyone at DC Comics should be over the moon with the performance of Poison Ivy #1. Fortnite X Marvel Zero War #1 of 5 absolutely dominated floppy comic sales in June 2022. I imagine this will stay steady, and this will be the #1 to 2, 3 title type thing until it actually ends. This is a good team up between Marvel and Fortnite. It worked for DC Comics. It appears to be working better for Marvel. You offer exclusive in-game skins and stuff like that through the comic book, and you have a nice little crossover comic that absolutely juices sales. I imagine the Thor movie coming out featuring Jane Foster as Thor certainly helped out the Jane Foster and the Mighty Thor #1. Thor and Grunbeck should be very happy with that performance. Nice to see new Fantastic Four #1 from Peter David showing up there. As I was mentioning, Captain America Sentinel Liberty #1, the Steve Rogers series, came in at number 18. And this is actually not very good at all. You would expect a character like Captain America, they're going to juice it up with some cool covers like this. You would expect it to be in the top 5. Worst case scenario, top 10. Showing up at 18 is bad juju, in my opinion. DC Pride 2022 one shot absolutely destroyed Marvel Voices Pride. Coming in at number 19, Marvel Voices Pride came in at 111. DC Comics put a lot more promotion behind their Pride anthology, and it absolutely paid off. These are $10 comic books. So DC likely made a lot of money on that one shot, while Marvel Comics kind of missed out on it, not promoting it very well. And then we see this big block of comic books that just did not perform well for number one issues. A lot of them are miniseries: Iron Cat, Dark Crisis, Young Justice, The Variants, Multiversity, Teen Justice, Aquaman, Andromeda. We got a couple one-shots in The Voices Pride, the Tim Drake special. Nubia, Queen of the Amazons, also a miniseries as well. But these are all essentially DOA. You don't want a number one issue coming in at under number 50 if you are a Big Two series. This is absolutely death for your comic book, especially the ones that they think are ongoing. We even got the debut of Chrysanthemum in the Marvel Star Wars comics, and that did not do well at all. It almost ended up outside the top 100. No one cares about Jessica Jones being every character in the Marvel Comics universe. We're seeing that story over and over and over. And look at Hulkling and Wiccan number one, showing up at 151. These are all very terrible performances out of a debut issue for a Big Two comic book. But DC Comics is really the big winner here, obviously, with Poison Ivy doing gangbusters for a G. Willow Wilson series, and then their DC Pride anthology book absolutely did great numbers. And certainly Marvel Comics isn't upset with the performance of Fortnite X Marvel. I mean, it came in at number one. I imagine it will stay up there, and we're getting a lot of crossover. Are they going to be able to convert some of these Fortnite players that are in there for the exclusive skins and whatnot to come in and be Marvel Comics readers? I doubt that. It didn't seem to work for DC Comics, but they are trying something, and at least they made some coin out of it. And I imagine a lot of retailers made some money as well. Now let's look at Marvel Comics by the franchises. Spider-Man is absolutely doing yeoman's work for Marvel Comics. 4 comic books coming in the top 10. Although the Miles Morales Spider-Man 38 is an outlier, you wouldn't expect that series to come in as a top 10 comic. Normally it's in the 50 to 100 category, and you can see by issue 39 it had already dropped down. That must have been some type of debut of a character or a milestone issue or something like that. You see some healthy stuff here. You see Venom showing up in the top 10. Carnage on the 3rd issue is still at number 33. Those are very good numbers for Spider-Man associated characters. Carnage is kind of a copy of a copy. Carnage kind of spun out of Venom, and that is very good news for Marvel Comics, and certainly good news for Ram V, who's also the co-writer on Venom. Miles Morales and Moon Girl, not shockingly, no one cares. That comic book debuted outside the top 100. I imagine they're going to be trying to make some money within the graphic novel market or something like that. Shocked to see Tim Seeley holding on at number 41 in the Spider-Gwen Gwenverse number 3. That is an absolutely trash series, but hey, apparently there's some interest in old Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider, whatever the hell you want to call that character. But Spider-Man is very healthy, a lot of stuff right at the very top, and Marvel Comics are very happy with the performance of Spider-Man. When we come down to the X-Men, things are a bit scarier. X-Men number 12, inside the top 15, very good. Wolverine hanging right outside the top 25. Perfectly fine. That's on its 22nd issue. It's been out for well over a year, coming up on 2 years. Remember, they just went into Destiny of X, the reboot. Look at Immortal X-Men. Debuted in the top 5 by the 3rd issue. It's already at number 28. X-Men Red, I believe, debuted at number 6. The 3rd issue, it's at number 32. The 4th issue, it's already down to number 65. That thing is destined to be outside the top 100 by issue number 8. Knights of X is even worse. The 1st issue debuted outside the top 50. 2nd issue, number 63. 3rd issue, number 75. I'm not surprised this thing has been canceled, even though it was solicited as an ongoing. Expect the exact same fate for Legion of X and Cy Spurrier. I had high hopes for this because I thought Way of X was a very good miniseries, but Legion of X was absolutely trash. I'm not surprised no one's reading this, but this is bad juju for the X-Men franchise, especially seeing X-Force drop outside the top 100. I don't remember it being that far down, but it's clear that staying in this phase 1 of what Jonathan Hickman had planned for X-Men was a terrible mistake from Marvel Comics. They should have moved on and done the 3-year plan that Jonathan Hickman came in with. But the writers in X-Men were like, no, we want to stay here. There's so many stories to mine. We know what we want to do. And he said, no, c'est la vie. Have fun working with my scraps and talking about stories that shouldn't even be being told because we should be moving forward with the damn thing. They decided to stay there, and it is not working out. I don't think the Krakoan era is just, quite frankly, popular. I think people are ready for it to be over. Maybe that's what's going to happen in Axe Judgment Day. I doubt it, but that would be the best thing that they could do, is just to kill off Krakoa and restart X-Men altogether. because they've got some bad stuff going on in the X-Men franchise. Thank goodness for Thor. Because without him, they'd be in some real trouble. Coming in at number 3, Jane Foster and the Mighty Thor debuting better than you would have expected, and even better than Captain America Sentinel of Liberty, the series featuring Steve Rogers. Now remember, Captain America's Symbol of Truth, the Falcon Cap series, debuted at number 15. At number 1, look at number 2. By the second issue, it was already at 122. That is an amazing drop. Do I think Captain America's Sentinel of Liberty will drop that badly? Probably not, because Steve Rogers is Captain America. But having two of them running around obviously is doing nothing for the character, and people don't like it. They want to see Steve Rogers as Captain America. Jason Aaron's time on Avengers has been dead for a long time. I don't know why they're at issue 57 with this. It's almost outside the top 100. Avengers should never be this low, sitting at number 91. Avengers Forever, Jason Aaron going and visiting fake Avengers from different times and multiverses and stuff. 6th issue at number 50. It's time to get a new voice on Avengers. Nobody wants Jason Aaron's take on Avengers anymore. It's just not very good. And then you have Captain Marvel sitting in at number 114 on issue number 38. Hey, listen, I will give Marvel Comics credit. It appears that they are determined not to reboot this thing so people will stop making fun of them for rebooting it every 6 months. But you can see by the sales data, there's no reason for it to exist. They should just do a Captain Marvel miniseries every year. 6 issues. It probably won't embarrass them. Then you don't have to keep resetting your ongoings, but it's just not a popular character. Kelly Thompson is one of the least offensive writers at Marvel Comics, but she's not a superstar. She's never going to be a superstar. I think your place on Captain Marvel is fine, but just do it miniseries so you don't have to keep embarrassing her. So that's your Marvel Comics analysis. Spider-Man is very healthy. We've got some good stuff here and there over in the Avengers franchise with Thor and stuff, but X-Men Destiny of X appears to be DOA. Not really surprising when you see the qualities in the books. Let's go look at DC Comics. We have to start out with Batman because that is almost everything that they actually produce. Not shockingly, Batman produces almost everything that sells. They did have a good performance out of Shadow War Omega, which obviously was the end of the Batman, Robin, Deathstroke Inc. crossover event. Nice to see that there. Batman, Superman, World's Finest hanging in the top 25. Happy to see that. They've also got some miniseries doing well. Obviously, Batman Beyond the White Knight, Flashpoint Beyond, Dark Knights of Steel, all doing very well. We'll see how Poison Ivy shakes out in the end. Batman Killing Time still in the top 50. Detective Comics, once again, flirting with going outside the top 100. And then we just get Batman Hell. Robin got no sales bump out of Shadow War crossover with Batman. DC Pride, Tim Drake Special, DOA. Batgirls with Clunrad, DOA. Harley Quinn with Stephanie Phillips, DOA. We've been talking about how terrible those are. But even worse is Jace Fox's fake Batman from John Ridley. He's not a good comic book writer. That's a bad series, and not surprisingly, it's down there at like 149. But Batman, the Fortress #2, it is beyond comprehension that a Batman 8-part miniseries starring Bruce Wayne as Batman could drop outside the top 100, let alone outside the top 150. Gary Whitta and Ben Abernathy made an enormous mistake with this direction for Batman the Fortress. It's a stupid idea. They didn't need to make it. There's enough Batman on the market. And coming out there with this Antifa-loving Batman where he's watching rioters and deciding not to do anything about it, just slap Batman fans in the face. You love this character? Well, we hate the character. Gary Whitta went out there and started disparaging Batman readers who had something to say about his take on Batman, called him a bunch of names. Not surprising, this thing is absolutely dead. I can't believe they've actually done it with a Bruce Wayne comic book, but Batman is not bulletproof. If you put a shitty writer like Gary Whitta and you have a shitty take like Batman the Fortress on the character, it will die. I'm not surprised to see this because this was absolutely awful. Now let's look at the rest of the characters because it's Batman and everyone else at DC Comics. Outside of Batman, Superman, World's Finest, Superman is absolutely DOA. Number 79, 95, 131 in sales. Action Comics War World Saga has been very good. Unfortunately, it's been overshadowed by a very lackluster, mediocre Superman Son of Kal-El title. The Wonder Woman franchise is in even worse shape. Nothing cracking the top 120. Nubia, Queen of the Amazons, a #1 issue, jumping in at 130. Wonder Woman just sitting there dying at 142. That's just so sad. It's really pathetic to see that DC Comics would have done that to the character. But when you put terrible writers like Clunrad, Vita Ayala, Stephanie Williams on these characters, no one's going to buy them because everyone knows that they're absolutely terrible. Justice League's not doing much better. Like I said, I would have expected to see the Dark Crisis #1 issue here, but it is nowhere to be found, so I'm not sure exactly how well it sold. I do have a feeling that this Justice League Road to Dark Crisis might have been overshipped, and that's how it jumped in the top 10. Doesn't feel like there's a lot of interest in Dark Crisis. You can see Dark Crisis Young Justice debuts outside of the top 50. The Flash is a Dark Crisis tie-in, sitting at number 88. It literally did nothing for the sales of any of the tie-in comic books. Dark Crisis doesn't appear to be a big winner, but they have to go through it because it's going all the way to December. The rest of 2022 is all about Dark Crisis and Batman, obviously, because you're going to have so much Batman content. We don't have a Green Lantern series. We've got nothing really with Aquaman anymore. Wonder Woman might as well be dead. We do get Clark Kent returning to Earth, in this crossover with Superman, Son of Kal-El, but is that going to do anything good for Superman? It doesn't feel like it. There's so many bad things going on at DC Comics, but at least they got, Poison Ivy did good. I don't think Dark Crisis is going to be a winner. The first 2 issues have been very disappointing. Every single tie-in has been awful, and obviously I am going to review the Tom King Superman tie-in that came out today. We'll see what happens with that, but there's some interesting stuff going on in the comic book industry as far as sales. DC Comics had a good month. 15 comics in the top 50. They haven't had that in a very long time. They actually had a 50% increase from last month when they only had 10, so that's good. But they also had less issues in the top 100. So DC Comics is in a weird place. Marvel Comics is very strong, writing Spider-Man, some Spider-Man associated stuff, Thor. There's a couple of X-Men titles doing some work, but they're just a more diversified line. More of their heroes are selling outside of just Spider-Man. And DC Comics cannot do that right now. They can't replicate it for nothing. So if you're a DC Comics fan, recently I talked about all the characters that they had, the big franchises, all the main ones, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Justice League, Teen Titans, all that kind of stuff, and talked about which characters or teams were on the right track, or at least the closest to the right track. This is a fun video kind of talking about all the big teams and stuff. Definitely check this out if you're a DC fan and see if you agree with me on what's working and what's not.